What's up, Warcoders? Bayou Boogie here, and we're going to go over a little bit of information that was given out yesterday during the developer Ask Me Anything hosted by Jappleseed and Cozy Orchards. So let's dive right into it. The Ask Me Anything lasted about 2 hours, and during that time, patrons could ask questions. Over 100 questions were asked. I've gone ahead and consolidated a lot of similar questions together and just want to give you some highlights from what we learned. So they're not going to necessarily follow the order of the Ask Me Anything, just for the purpose of keeping the discussion streamlined. So first off, the exciting news, version 11 update is coming soon. What is going to be in there? Breeding will be in version 11. However, it's not fully rolled out quite yet. Breeding chambers are a new item, and breeding at this time requires 2 level 5 monsters in a breeding canister. The offspring created by breeding combine the prompts from those 2 parent monsters to create a new monster that resembles those parents' appearances. Currently, their stats, resistances, weaknesses, etc., are going to be determined randomly, rolled between the parents' stats. NAs, they remain a 1 in 200 chance or a 0.5%. There's still some concerns where we don't want to release breeding too early, as there's a few aspects that need some work, such as gauging what impact it'll have on some of the larger parts of the game. But something you will be able to play with right away when it comes out is a new feature called scene items. So scene items are going to be a new item similar to potions, but they only affect the monster's background. Um, so basically, there'll be a new special slot in the monster page for these items. They'll be applied like potions. Um, they work a lot like swords and stuff do right now, where the monster image will change, but it's going to use the same base prompt, so hopefully the monster looks very similar, but it gets a cool new background. There were a few questions later on diving deeper into that, so I'm including it here. So there was a question regarding monsters that currently have a background. So something like, oh, this guy, Abyssia. So he's already got a background, more or less. If I were to add this new scene item to him, it sounds like it will replace that background. So something to keep in mind. Um, so the way it works is the monster prompt has several different pieces of the prompt. There's a character description, but there's also other pieces of the description that help define the style and look of the game. For instance, the base um, image generation tells them to create the base background as an all dark background with blue light. Um, and so when they were messing with things, they realized they could override that to create new backgrounds, and so that's how the scene items became developed. Um, so yeah, pretty cool. We look forward to seeing what that'll do. Um, Another new feature will be anonymous login. So one of the barriers to new players is, I guess, creating an account. So when they download the game and they're like, oh, I got to put them in my email address and date of birth, poof, and then they just decide not to play. But this will allow people to download the game, start playing right away, and then they can later link that information to make their account more permanent. But the hope is that this will make the game more approachable to new players, and just another help towards that barrier of entry. So another really cool announcement. So players have already probably seen the new Rotoni merchant in the market, and he has some TMNT-inspired potions and products. Warcodes has purchased a 30-second sponsor slot that'll be featured in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 35th anniversary theatrical re-release. This is currently underway. It's running from today, August 15th, through August 21st. So if you happen to be attending a theater and get to see Warcode's ad, make sure you cheer for your favorite mobile game. They're expecting to see a big influx of new players over the next week. Version 11 will likely roll out after that at some point because we don't want to break anything while new players are coming in. So those were the two big announcements that we got coming up, and pretty exciting stuff. We're going to keep going, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff that's coming soon, but might not be in that initial version 11. Tutorials. Tutorials are coming. Those will be something to help new players acclimate to the game a bit smoother. They are a work in progress. Another thing is music. So the music that Set Zero has been working on has reached Japple, and so he can begin working on implementation into the game. So it's not there yet, but it's getting closer. We're going to move on into a lot more of the Q&A section of the discussion. Um, there were a lot of questions that approached similar uh, portions of the game, so I kind of summarized them together. So first I'm going to talk about some game modes and events. So the current format of events are those what we can expect for future events. And Japple responded with, they're still exploring different event modes, and the events will get bigger, and they will involve things like world traveling. So the goal is to have a whole map that opens up into different areas with different challenges and PvE modes and stuff. So the current format will get us by as they develop new features. Some big ones being asked for guilds and raid bosses. Guilds will eventually be in there, but they're more of a long-range feature. They would like to get some additional game modes first. Japple talked about a new grid-based gameplay that they're tinkering around with. It's actively being discussed. Something where you'd have a team of monsters that you'd move around a board against an opponent, and certain grid squares could have additional benefits or drawbacks. The current PvE environment is kind of boring, so some grid-based gameplay would add some flexibility, more engaging gameplay, and function like a dungeon with loot at the end or something like that. Moving on to that, world expansion, so new zones. The in-game events will expand into new areas in the future. It's a little bit further out, but they're being worked on. So Zivalon is our capital city. And then there will be a travel screen from which we can go to explore other areas, like, say, a volcanic region. Some people may have noticed there's been some changes to the main map. Another issue was new players weren't being able to find the PvE forests, so they moved them in closer where everything's on one screen. There's also potential for new buildings, such as a breeding building, where players would go to get that information. Some questions about merchants and shops. Selling, hopefully soon. It's actually fairly easy to implement, and he'll be happy to get rid of that current placeholder that they've got. They do plan to continue using Patreon supporter names for merchants. Another thing that was discussed is implementing a premium currency. So right now, every in-app purchase has to be reviewed through Apple and Google, and they're just a pain and very time consuming to get implemented. So like something like, for instance, 3 of a potion, 10 of a potion, 100 of a potion, that's 3 separate submissions to the App Store that all have to be reviewed and looked over, and it just makes it a huge pain. If they add an in-app currency that you can purchase for different amounts, and then make the premium items cost that currency, that takes the app stores out of that timeline for having to approve those purchases. So we will probably see a premium currency happen at some point, because it's going to just streamline the way they can get items into the game. Somebody asked if there were going to be new items to change up the meta. They feel it's a bit stale. Japple said that actually new game modes would be a larger priority, such as the grid-based PvE. Something like that would encourage some new items. But they'll have to, again, see how they fit into the larger scope of the game. Everlife potions were discussed. Somebody asked if they would be able to buy more, and they must have been overlooked. They were hoping to actually, he thought they were in there somewhere, but they've probably been overlooked, but that's something that they want to give an overhaul to make them more attractive to use. Some people see them as detrimental right now, so they're looking at making Everlife potions a better item, hopefully, and then they can get them brought back. Um, User info, friends. So we're familiar with the your under construction area. So they want to add a bunch of stuff. They want to add ways to earn additional monster slots, things like reaching level milestones, stuff like that. Achievements could factor into this, but achievements are kind of on hold while they focus on other features. They are working on updates to friends with features such as the ability to share your collection, decorate this player profile area. Um, this is partially coded already. More so, they've got to create all the items that you could decorate in here, like trophies and stuff like that. Another question was about the about leaderboards, and they would like to implement in-game leaderboards like the ones that are on Discord that show like top users by XP, top monsters by XP, top rookie monsters, things like that. There's also other data such as a monster's win-loss record that is currently not tracked that they'd consider maybe adding as another metric into the game, but no huge plans on it, but it's something that they'd like to see happen, time allowing. Some discussion on actual monsters. So what is the future of monster leveling? So unknown at this time. What does it look like when a monster goes above level 5? Do they get, say, more cosmetic slots? Something where they're looking at suggestions. Um, they have some ideas, but they're not quite ready to share anything concrete at this point. Um, so, questions about renaming monsters. I don't know if you're like me, but I believe I have 2 or 3 monsters named Verdant Wraith. This one's my favorite one. Uh, so what about renaming monsters? That's something they would eventually like to put in there. It might work something like the photo chamber where you get a few options to choose from. You'd never be able to like type out a name for a monster, but having the AI spawn, a selection of names and you can choose from them is something that they may be able to implement at some point in time. Question about re-rolling stats. Not exactly. There is discussion about adding additional information before you spawn a monster regarding kind of the potential outcomes of that monster. So maybe you're scanning, you know, toy cars, and it might tell you that this has an 80% chance of metal attack, 30% chance for fire resist, 30% for electric. Something where it gives you a little bit of info before you choose to hit the spawn button. That's something that's been discussed. It's not necessarily coming, but it's something they're considering. Um, just not real sure exactly what direction you want to go there. Um, Trading or monster adoption. Again, those are things that there's a lot of discussion around, and they have internal discussions because it would be good for people to be able to get more use out of those monsters, but there is nothing concrete planned yet. Another question was, what about a way to increase our monster's hit point? Um, so, like, let's say you spawn a 1/1/1, looks awesome, maybe he's NA, and he's one you want to keep, but he's only got 72 hit points instead of 79 hit points. So maybe there are ways that we could allow our monster's health to get upgraded from the base to max for that stat line, whether it's by tokens or maybe feeding them other monsters, things like that. Um, Again, nothing concrete, but it's discussed. Monster locking. So Jappel said this is an easy thing to add, but it'll likely come along with a monster screen revamp, which is something that they're working on as part of the UI stuff. Uh, so the monster screen is going to need a new one for this new scene item. They'd like to do something that makes the icons for resists and weakness pop a little bit more. Add abilities to favorite monsters, mark your own monster as not safe for work, flag them, things like that. There's also requests to see a battle rune from monster screens to know that they have that equipped. So there's some stuff going on there. But yeah, we should be seeing a monster screen revamp sometime in the near future. Um, Japple also mentioned they'd like to improve organizing monsters, and they talked specifically about PvE, maybe adding suggested monsters to that list of monsters to kind of speed up the process of selecting the monsters to take into combat. Might help new players a little bit, things like that. Another question was, could we ever see potions that would add weapons to our monsters? Things like bow and arrows, maces, axes. Um, and Japple responded with, unfortunately, the AI struggles even with sword placement. We've all seen some of the sword neckties or the flying swords. Holding a sword is an issue for the AI. So maybe someday down the line, when AI tech improves enough to understand that a little bit better, it'd be something to look into. But for right now, they want to avoid things that'll cause poor images to spawn that people wouldn't want. There were a couple of questions regarding some of the data in the game. So how many daily players on average? Uh, Japple says it fluctuates. Certain ad campaigns can add some big spikes or jumps in daily use. He'd say daily averages are around 1,500 to 2,000 users every day. They've seen some peaks in that 2,300, 2,400 range, which really that's pretty amazing, I think. That's a lot of players. Um, how many monsters have been spawned? So this wasn't something that was tracked prior to around March, um, when they made it so you could remove items and like revert monster images, things like that. But since March, over 5 million monster images have been generated. That includes your photo chamber spawns, barcode spawns, custom code spawns, etc. And somebody asked, well, how much does it cost for those spawns? And Japper responded, it's pretty fluid because as the numbers go higher, the cost per spawn decreases, but current costs are something like, say, 0.3 of a cent per image. All right, so then we got to talking about some Patreon questions. First off, there were some questions around the $50 Patreon tier, the one where you get to create your own custom code. First off, they're very happily surprised by the number of people that have signed up for it. They've recently created a new user portal. They built that out with the aid of AI. And some of the things they're looking at are future updates to Patreon may include something like monthly loot boxes for different tiers, things like that. There was questions about other user-generated content beyond custom monster codes. Is there potential for things like custom potions? Maybe. Those are long-range ideas. There's also thoughts of maybe user-created shops that you could maybe pick and choose what items are in those shops based on your what you'd like your friends to see. Again, those are long-term ideas, but we'll see what happens. Some other questions with custom codes. So some issues have come up, such as copyright, and unfortunately those particular codes have to be rejected. They can't have anything potentially generating a copyrighted character coming out of custom codes. However, on the other hand, Patreon does have better support for the game. More of the money that's paid into Patreon goes directly to them to develop the game versus the in-game purchases, because Apple and Google actually take about 30% of those in-app purchases. And so Patreon does open up another opportunity to help invest in the game and help keep it growing. And so they really hope this new Patreon portal will allow them to expand on that feature. There were some questions about the community and how it developed out of the game. And Japple responded with the community kind of grew itself. It began when they launched ads on Reddit, and they can remember when there were 10 people joined the Reddit, and they began sharing stuff and posting stuff. Japple said he was really active in the early days, which he feels like helped because people seem to appreciate that feedback straight from the developer. as the community's grown to the size that it has now, he's not able to be quite as involved. Um, he says the community has started to kind of flatten out a little bit, but there's still influxes of new players happening. Moderators are players who have just been active. He reads the suggestions channel almost daily and really enjoys seeing the ideas people have. While some of them might be a little far-fetched, it does help to see what people are envisioning for the future, and then they can look at it and see if it's something they could do, maybe in a different way, um, different things like that. So keep those suggestions coming. They are appreciated. Daytime tournaments. Will those come back? Yeah, they can probably cycle those back in again a little bit. All right. There were some questions regarding different changes, like what was a change he would like to see happen in the game. Um, Jappel says the number one change he wants to see is getting a consistent UI across the game. Right now, there's about 4 different styles being used, but that takes time, art, and other assets to get fixed. Uh, he'd like to see new game modes that improve the fun of PvE. Chambers are on a list with that UI revamped. They'd like to add some quality of life improvements. Stuff like auto-filling healing chambers has come up. Maybe different colors for your photo versus your healing chambers. Things like that. Um, we'll get there eventually, we hope. We were asked, or community asked about what are some of the pains or headache features that have been a struggle. Player onboarding, tutorials, the anonymous logins, those have been a pain. Collecting B-days as part of account creation met some backlash. So new onboarding flow is hard because you have to be careful not to break your critical paths. And they also take a lot more time to test and fix bugs. Questions about worldwide rollout. There's a lot of people on Reddit that would like to play, but they're not from the US or Canada. He says it's difficult to do this basically because there are different compliance rules for every single country. So stuff like certain countries have things against like loot boxes. So if you release your game in that country with that feature, you open yourself up to massive fines for not meeting their compliance rules. I remember back when World of Warcraft first came out, that the Chinese version of it, they were very against skeletons and stuff like that, so the undead had to be less undeady in order for that game to be released to that very massive player base. So, to be determined. We'll see how long it takes to get them there. I know we would like to see it, but there's just a lot of hurdles and legal mumbo-jumbo there. Copyrights and not safe for work monsters. Those were 2 expected hurdles that they knew they'd have to work through. They showed up week 1 when people were scanning items of adult nature and sharing them. There were some early design decisions, such as the Colossus elixir, that was overpowered, and it was stressful to remove something like that because your players are invested. Jappel said he literally lost some sleep over the decision to remove that item and lost some players, but it was a necessary change. In retrospect, if he were to start all over, he might have bypassed healing as a game mechanic entirely, but since it's part of the game now, it's something you don't want to get rid of. He's learned a lot about item balance, and they don't want to release new items without an abundance of caution. Some other questions, such as the AI tweaks. Concern about those happening. And he actually said they happen way more often than people realize. Usually they're not actively noticed. However, hopefully we don't get another invasion of the lizards like with the big update fairly recently. And another question as far as ever implementing an in-game chat. It's extremely unlikely. Unfortunately, in-game chat usually leads to a toxic environment, and it's really difficult to regulate it. So it's just something that's not necessary in the current environment and will likely not happen. Jappel also gave an update on the team behind Cozy Orchards and Warcodes. He's no longer a solo dev on the project. He's joined up with a past colleague out of Austin, Texas, who is an I believe, a software engineer, and they formerly worked together at EA on the Tiger Woods games. Mrs. Appleseed, of course, is helping him. She loves creating the new potions, and she does a lot of the work on the custom codes for Patreons. They've added a part-time UI designer and another UI artist. Taylor, their intern, collects monsters for the events. If you're part of the Patreon, you've probably seen her in the Monster Submissions channel. And there are also several advisors on the business side. There was a question about attending conventions and stuff. He says he would absolutely love to attend more of those, but right now it's a time versus cost thing. But as the game grows and the team grows, so does the potential to add, or so does the potential to maybe attend more of those events. And just to close things off, there were some miscellaneous questions, or just personal questions to Jappel. So as of June 1st, he's been working on Warcodes full time. Someone asked, do you get any days off? He says, nope. Usually he's checking things either via phone or PC, unless he's decided to go camping with family. What's your favorite breakfast food? Biscuits and gravy. As a personal note, that should be everybody's answer because it is the best breakfast food. Somebody asked what his favorite user-created monster was. He said that's a tough one because there's been so many cool ones that they've seen through the game, but one that comes up time and time again when he's discussing the game with people is the boot spawned by Caribou. It's an amusing one. Like, this monster is just a giant boot. What's his favorite potion? Jappel says he enjoys Toxic Bloom. He likes the colorful fauna and stuff with it. Mrs. Appleseed is a big fan of the Sea Glass potion. What are your favorite activities? He enjoys fishing, camping with his brothers a couple times a year to disconnect, and golf is another hobby. What was your favorite part of the game to design? He said designing how the AI transforms a barcode into a monster was really fun. It's called prompt engineering. Building the mechanics for the images, the stats, all that was very fun. Balancing the battle system was a lot of fun. That took weeks of simulations, running the variable stat lines, defining archetypes, stuff like that. There was a question about QR codes. Will QR codes ever spawn monsters beyond the custom ones that are created by Patreons? Unfortunately, a regular old QR code basically just points you to a website or something. They don't have inherent data that could be used for spawning monsters. So that all has to be done manually. However, there's some fun ideas that could be tied into things like sponsorships using QR codes. They talked about potential to work with like influencers using a QR code tied to their brand, which would also help with advertising and things like that. Somebody asked about having a newsletter. And maybe, what would people like to see in a newsletter? A really interesting portion of the discussion was talking about version 10, the big update. Everybody remembers the big update, I hope. It redid the whole thing, gave us this beautiful map and all the new UI bits and bobs we've got. He said version 10's big update was a lesson on why most companies keep timelines a secret, because as soon as version 10 was announced, a bunch of players began taking breaks to prepare to play more when version 10 came out. So he saw a decrease in daily users, a decrease in in-app purchases, etc. It was all very detrimental to the development side. So from here on, he's going to have to be very cautious with timelines and kind of what information comes out. Somebody asked, how many monsters do you have? Jappel responded, I have multiple accounts, but 415 monsters on my main account. Most of those were spawned in one sitting when he was trying to bug fix some early performance issues with players that had large collections. And they're not very optimal. So there you have it. 2 hours of information. We knocked it out in about 30 minutes. We also got a face reveal of Jappel, and it was a great look into some of the background of the game, and I hope we have another one in the future. So until then, we're going to look forward to version 11, and maybe we're going to go watch some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and see if we get to enjoy a Warcodes commercial for 30 seconds before the movie. Well, as always, guys, Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the swamp.